Welcome to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Devotions designed to inspire you on your daily walk with God. Here's your host, Ken Gurley.
Hey, good morning devotion family. All of you are here. Every one of you. I saw Dawn, I saw Angie, I saw Catherine and Trenton. Happy Wednesday, August the 18th. How should we then live the year of the happen? That we're going to see some things happen in our world, that God is going to use us and use us greatly. So welcome this morning. Having a technical difficulty. My mic is going in and out. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me right now? My mic keeps muting. What's the deal? Who keeps hitting my mute button? Oh, well, such is the vagaries of Facebook Live and YouTube Live, but I'm happy you're here. Thank you for being here. We're living in pivotal times, perilous times, difficult times. We knew these days were coming. And we also know that God is going to be with us. God's going to see us through these days. And one of the ways he does it is through morning devotion, just getting together with people that love God, and we're going to see God happen. So, Julie, Tammy, it's so good to see you here. Jed, I'm happy you're here. Don, Edna, thankful for the MD family during this time. So many prayer requests. Please leave some prayer requests out to the side. Take a few moments. We have so many needs from those who regularly are a part of this family. And this is the time for the family to step up and to shine and to see God doing things. Again, I apologize. My mic is intermittent this morning. I see it phasing in and out. I hope you can hear me. I hope it's coming through. How should we then live the year of the slipped mask? As we see this rising so-called Delta variant, we start to hear again of lockdowns and shutdowns. Not nearly so strong as last year, but we've lived through this. We've lived through about 16 months, 18 months of this now. Back then, we didn't know what the sickness really was, no experience with it, no understanding of it, had little treatments, what would work, what wouldn't work. And believers were caught in one conundrum after another. You see, as believers, we're taught to be respectful of civil authority, as the Apostle Paul taught the Romans. Yes, the Romans, the believers in the heart of the Roman Empire, with all of its Caesars and all of its oppression and all of its conquest and all of its immorality, that the Apostle Paul taught the Roman believers that civil government is divinely ordained, that all authority is from God, and human authority is delegated to men by God. And after all, we go way back to Daniel's vision: the golden head, the Babylonian Empire, chest of silver, Medo-Persian Empire, waist of brass, Greece, and those legs of iron were Rome. In other words, forecast and prophesied, predicted centuries before Paul wrote that to Roman believers. This was foreseen by Daniel. All authority, Paul said, comes from God, and he delegates authority to men, whether secular, spiritual, democratic, or autocratic, godless or God-fearing. Rulers are not a cause for fear if your behavior is good. If you do good, why fear government? This was Paul's argument. If you don't do good, then civil authority is coming for you. You speeders, beware out there, says he who just finished a defensive driving course. Yes. Our behavior towards civil authority is crucial. We cooperate, we comply. We're not rude, not disrespectful. Paul said, after all, they are ministers of God. We do this as a testimony to God. We submit ourselves to God and one another. Here's the conundrum. We realize, though, that this world is not really our home. We answer to a higher authority and a higher king. And our submission to civil authorities, it's not absolute. As Jesus told Pilate, he would have no authority unless God permitted it. As Peter and John told the Sanhedrin, we can't stop speaking about Jesus. We're going to obey God rather than men. And this is a conundrum. On the one hand, we're taught to submit to civil authorities. But on the other hand, our submission is not absolute. We stand for another kingdom. And that has been the war raging in the Christian community for quite a while. And as the mandates and the shutdowns and all of the restrictions of things like social distancing or wearing of masks that you see depicted behind me, and how far should it be taken? When does it stop? Will it ever stop? This has been a conundrum on the moral level, but it's also been a spiritual conundrum that we've got to choose, and we're perplexed by our choices. It's one of faith versus fear. We are people of faith. Can I get a witness to that? We are, Tricia, Martha. We're people of faith. We walk by faith. The church is at her best when she's filled with faith. And through the centuries, the church overcame fear, personal harm, and injury to minister to those in need. She rose when others hid. She extended a hand when others clenched their fists. And she ministered to people who had no one else to help. Despite a threat, despite the danger, the church acted. She didn't act out of a grandiose messianic complex. She acted just from the goodness of her heart, from the love and from the confidence of a holy purpose. And the church made a difference. But during this difficult season, we've been told that ministering to others, helping others, well, that's frowned upon, outlawed, banned. Yeah, we not allowed to grow closer together and to care for one another. That was dangerous. And I saw something happen in people. I saw a fear that I've not seen in all my years of pastoring. People were afraid of one another. Fear takes many forms, but one of the most misunderstood forms of fear is anger. The fear of loss of control, the fear of loss of freedoms, the fear of loss of identity and purpose. That fear manifests itself as anger. That fear of loss, that I'm losing something, that something is irretrievably slipping beyond my grasp. And believers have been lost in that fear of loss for the past year. And I've seen a lot of fear manifest as anger. It's expressed in hurtful conversations, defiance, lashing out, hurtful words. The mask slipped in this last year. And we saw that there are people in control whose sole job seems to be to keep others in control. And the mask slipped, and we realized that some immoral people in leadership can single out the righteous and can single out the worshipers. The mask slipped. We also saw the church was not at her best. She was isolated and disconnected, fearful, yes, even angry. The mask slipped this last year. In this last year and a half, while people were masking, a moral mask actually slipped. And we saw that mask slips. And we saw different rules for the haves and the have-nots. And we saw the mask slip. We saw that there is a rising hunger for power amongst some over the meek. We saw the mask slip between what a godless antichrist authority would look like and how it would treat the church, how it would treat the righteous. Yeah, we saw it. We saw anger rise. We saw fear rise. We saw oppression. We saw that some could skirt authority without any impunity. Some could not. Yeah. We saw the mask slip. And we on this morning devotion group, Anna, Gail, we're citizens of two worlds, the present world in which we live and the heavenly world, which is our true homeland. And we wrestled with these perplexing issues: how to minister when being told we couldn't, and how to care when our caring was misinterpreted, how to stand up for truth without simply being perceived as argumentative. Our faith is not seen best when we shout over people's concern. Our faith is not seen in getting the faces of civil authority. Our faith is best seen in an outstretched hand, a smiling face, a listening ear, and our prayers. We have lived through the year of the slipped mask. We've seen secular society de-emphasis on Christianity, on the church, bars, strip joints, marijuana shops, all claimed essential. Church, not so much. You look at the list of essential workers, and those of us who work in the church and around the church, we've watched this. During the height of the pandemic, you'll search in vain for anything Christian related. You'll find government workers there, and we're thankful for those. You will find grocery store workers there. We're thankful for those. You're going to find people that work in the energy sector, the oil, gas, electrical worker. You're going to find transportation workers. You're going to find boatloads of people with all occupations, and we're thankful for each and every one of them. But the church, not essential, inessential. And that is the way it's viewed today. The inessential church. The mask slipped, and we saw society, a godless society, reveal itself. So here's the question: how should we then live? That's a question from Ezekiel 33 in the Watchman chapter. It's a question borrowed by Francis Schaeffer for his classic work by the same title. Schaeffer was to evangelical Christianity what Luther was to early Protestantism. Schaeffer was the guiding voice of a post-World War movement for the Christian world to not isolate themselves, but influence the world. In that classic work, How Should We Then Live?, Schaeffer provides a glimpse of the rise and fall of world orders, how each civilization that had a faulty foundation would surely collapse. He traced the Western civilization decline into the 19th and 20th centuries, and he spoke of a line of despair that when crossed, a civilization crumbled. And he defined the greatest wickedness as being putting anyone or anything in the place of God and serving that person, that institution, as God. How should we then live? He took that from the Watchman chapter, and that's how we should live. As watchmen on the wall, as spiritual observers, in the year of a slit mask, in the year when so-called science was redefined as despair, when reason became confusion, obedience became oppression, how should we then live? Let me give you 4 ways we need to live. We need to live with awareness. We need to understand where we are. We are in the free fall of a society that has abandoned God. That's what Francis Schaeffer saw: a collapse of godliness after the Second World War, a questioning of God, his ways, his character, an abandoning of the Creator. Our modern society has put self in the place of God, and self knows best. The moral absolutes of the universe abandoned, the character of God abandoned to better express self. And we saw one thing after another fall by the wayside: church involvement, attendance, godliness in dress and behavior, respect for word-based ideals and lifestyle, family, marriage. We're in free fall, away from God, away from the moorings of moral absolute. We are in the last days, the last of the last days. You need to be aware. How should we then live? With awareness. What can be shaken will be shaken, so that that which remains is of God. And I pray we are a part of that remains. How should we then live? With awareness, but also with grace. One of the things that struck me in this last 18 months, in the year of the slit mask, is the gracelessness I've seen. I see those with legitimate concern for their health. They wear masks, they socially distance, and they're treated with gracelessness by those who don't do those things. Never has there been so much pressure to go along to get along. I see those who believe themselves invincible. How many people did I hear to say, oh, I had the virus long before they even knew what it was. And then they acted like the virus wasn't real until it got real to them and it hit home. Where's our grace? Where's the gracefulness of our day? There's a divine measure of mercy and kindness that should be poured out on others, a godly ability to show deference one to another, to treat each other as children of the Creator. We need grace. You see, the enemy's up to something. Never have we seen people so divided as now. We're racing from one divisive issue to another, encountering people are at each other's throats because the enemy knows if we can stay angry at one another, and fearful of one another, we're divided, and divided we will always fall. What should we do? The division. What should we do with these vaccines? Should I be vaccinated? Should I not be vaccinated? What should I do? We've got one group over here saying people who refuse to get vaccinated should be shunned and treated as outcasts. They are the problems. As appalling as it sounds, one of the greatest threats listed by the World Health Organization and others is people who refuse to be vaccinated. One of the greatest threats in the world, they say. On the other hand, we've got one group who say that vaccines are of the devil. And we got people saying, if you get it, you get in the mark of the beast. You hear me carefully. There is nothing in the Bible that says thou shalt be vaccinated or thou shalt not be vaccinated. But what you do, you've got to do in faith. What you do, prayerfully consider what you should do. It may not be what someone else's does, but don't force your opinion on someone else's lifestyle. Show grace. We need, as never before in 2021, I'm just telling you, Douglas, we need people to get out of the seat of the scornful and quit judging others. That's how we should live. With grace. How should we then live? With grace? With awareness? What about this? With forethought. We understand that we are in an increasingly anti-Christian, anti-faith society. Our governmental leaders do not model Christian values, anything but. You may expect that in a secular society, but we're in an increasingly hostile society for faith. So plan accordingly. What can I do today? What can I teach today? What can I share with those I love today to prepare them more for a godless world? What can I, like Jochebed, put in the heart of a baby Moses when he becomes an adult, he will stand for truth and righteousness? Or like that Israelite woman who, what can I put in the heart of my daughter when even if she's a slave in a pagan country, she will still have faith in God and point her leprous master to a prayer answering, healing God? Live intentionally. Live with forethought. We may not always be able to worship publicly and freely. I say that with grief. Our stance on godliness may be viewed as hate speech. Live with forethought. How are we going to prepare? How should we then live? We should live, fourth of all, with courage. When the sun goes down, the stars come out. This day did not catch God by surprise. He knew it was coming. Abraham lived in a godless place, and God called him out. You think of those 4 kingdoms and everybody in those kingdoms that lived for God with courage. The head of Gold Babylon. What about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego living in that godless place? God preserved them. They took a stand. They had convictions. That chest of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire. What about Daniel? He survived both Babylonian and Medo-Persian empires. Esther thrust into that godless system, but she acted courageously. And those legs of iron, Rome, the church was born in. And regardless of those 10 successive tyrannical Caesars, the church flourished. Underground, contained, persecuted, torn, but they conquered the known world with the gospel. Hear me, believers. We have an obligation to face our world with courage. How should we then live? With a discernment of the times, with grace, with forethought, with courage, We've walked through some difficult seasons. We remain in the heart of an uncertain time. Carefully, prayerfully, look to the future and consider where you are and what God is doing. Wrap your hearts and minds around that we are citizens of another world. He is our coming King. We live in submission to civil authority until it defies that kingdom reality. And when we are forced to disagree, we do with conviction and grace and dignity, not with the clenched fist, not with the threat of violence, but above all, we got to keep our hearts and minds stayed on Jesus. Don't bring any dishonor to his name. Live as salt and light in this earth. Be a brother and a sister to your fellow believer. Be kind and compassionate one to another. I'm just wanting to tell this morning devotion family, Jesus is coming. Oh, yes, he is. And I want to be ready to meet him, not brawling with my brother and sister over what they choose or choose not to do, but to open my heart and to say, God, I need my brother. I need my sister as never before. We are living in the last of the last days. The mask of our society has slipped. We see spirit of Antichrist out there. We recognize an increasingly hostile environment to people of faith. I urge you that we need to stand together as never before in prayer and in faith, that even here, yes, when the sun goes down, the stars are coming out, and we're going to know how to live, and we're going to behave ourselves more wisely than everyone around us, and we're going to understand and perceive and be sensitive to that voice of God giving us direction in these last days. Oh, praise God. CL, thank you for being a part of this today. Barbara, Brenda, thank you for being a part of this. You know the drill, like, share, follow. You may need to send a note that audio was messed up at the beginning of this. Isn't that just how it happens? Yeah. But God knows. Let the word get out. Let's stand together. Let's be strong. God's got something for the children of God. And I believe there is a generation rising up, declaring an awakening, declaring a new day and a dawning of spiritual reality, that even here, we're going to see the mighty hand of God at work. Pray one for another. Leave your prayer requests, circle around, pray during the day. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. God bless you. In Jesus' name.
Thank you for listening to Morning Devotion with Ken Gurley. Join us next time for another inspiring devotion. To support this ministry, please visit firstchurch.com/give.